A lot has happened, I know, for you personally in that time, but not so much in terms of musical output. And I think obviously the big and overriding question with Patience is why the long wait? Yeah.
Well, I mean, the truth of that is just that I was going through a huge amount of depression after my mother died. That was kind of masked by the whole outside, the whole arrest thing. It was, in a strange sort of way, 6 months that I spent trying to make the record that I needed to make about that incident and promoting the greatest hits or whatever, and in a way fighting for my reputation. That was a great distraction for me. And at that point in time, I felt like I had finished grieving for my mother, who died about 18 months before. And in reality, I think when I look back, it was a fantastic distraction because it was about me. And it was so intensely about me and everyone trying to save my career, as it were, although I wasn't very worried about that. But it was really about me, and in various ways my life had been about other people, about terminal illness and bereavement and stuff like that. And this was something in a strange kind of way that, even though it was disastrous or could have been disastrous, the outcome I knew was going to depend on me.
Right.
And for the first time in maybe, I don't know, 10 years, best part of 10 years, something disastrous was my fault. It was like, and I could possibly do something about it.
Right.
Whereas a lot of the other things that have been going on there's nothing I could have done about either of the people that I lost, and there's certainly nothing I could have done to make myself feel better about it. But there was something about the whole incident of getting arrested and then saving my reputation to some degree that was about me, and when that was finished, I just went whew. It was like I fell through the floor because there was nothing to distract me from the fact that I was missing my mum so much, really.
So so when you talk about that really sort of crashing, that falling to the floor period, how hard was it? How did it manifest itself? Were you unable to write, unable to create at all?
I was unable to write, completely unable to write, but unfortunately I didn't just accept that, I just kept going and got more and more depressed and more freaked that I had obviously what we call writer's block, and more freaked that it wasn't going to stop, that it wasn't going to end. I was not going to be able to make the next album that I needed to make. And I tend to, I feel very guilty when I'm not working. So even though people think I just go away and sun myself on a beach somewhere, in reality that probably would have been the best thing to do, because I just wasn't inspired. I was in too much emotional pain to actually turn it into something positive. So I just kind of kept banging my head against a brick wall for the best part of 3 years and becoming more and more depressed. It was like a vicious cycle,
What toll did that take on your relationship with Kenny, on your family? Were your sisters helpful in helping you get through this?
I think sometimes it's difficult with family to be around family in the period after you lose a parent, because it's a family, but there's something missing, and the loss of a parent within a family when you're together is so massively apparent in some way that I don't think I could get that much comfort from my family. Kenny was a huge source of comfort, and just having someone in my life that loved me and I really believed was going to be there for me absolutely helped. And sometimes I felt guilty that was not enough. Why was I still in this terrible black hole when I had someone by my side who was trying to help me through it, But bereavement is a very strange thing. It's different for everybody, I suppose.
So you didn't really try and pressure yourself, I really need to get back to making some music and getting something out there?
No, I did. I never stopped pressuring myself. What I should have done was just stopped for a while, given myself time to grieve properly outside of that process, and then come back. But I was too terrified to stop, because that would mean living with the grief. When in fact all I was doing was making things worse and worse by banging my head against a brick wall and then feeling worthless for not coming up with anything that I was satisfied with,
But now you're happy with this record?
Oh yeah, the last 18 months of my life have been, that cloud has lifted, and much as I still miss my mother, my life has started again, And I think there's no question that after all of that upheaval and kind of darkness, a much stronger individual than I was before it happened. I feel stronger than maybe I had I think I had this kind of enthusiasm in my late teens, early 20s when the whole Wham thing first exploded, but I don't remember ever feeling this mentally strong.
So no regrets in retrospect about taking on Sony in the way that you did all those years ago?
Oh no, I know, because ultimately if I hadn't taken on my record company in the early 90s, then I would still be contracted under a really average deal, and I'd still probably have about 3 albums to go with my output, you know, because I put out so little music, so little music that it really would have been, I still would have been under contract on my deathbed, I think.
Yeah.
So, no, I'm very glad, because this time, you know, 10, 12 years later, it's very much on my own terms, and, you know, we're in a different world, really. Things have changed.
We're in a different world in many respects since I last saw you, and I know you don't want to go too much into sort of the political side of things.
No, nobody else wants me to go too much into the political side.
Is that right? Oh, okay.
It's okay, so we won't.
You know how much I love talking about these things.
It'll only be ripped out. The world has changed.
As an entree into it, last night I saw a screening of Fahrenheit 9/11, the Michael Moore film.
Oh, really?
Which really, condenses into 2 hours a lot of what was the sort of
Do you think it's going to do the trick?
I don't know. We'll see. He's hopeful anyway. But you know, obviously, Shoot the Dog came out. It's a record that never came out in this country. It's not on the U.S. version of the album. But any regrets about doing that and being as outspoken as you were in the run-up to the war?
Well, I was so wrong, wasn't I?
I don't know.
No, I have no regrets. I have to say, I didn't kick up a fuss about the fact that it wasn't going to be released here, because I didn't make it to offend Americans. I made it to warn my own country about Mr. Blair.
Right.
And really, I think I think actually Mr. Bush probably comes off better than I do, or Mr. Blair does in that video. But no, I made it at a particular point in time because I was one of many people, well, not many artists, but many people who were trying to wave a red flag and prevent, or at least build enough resistance in the public that politicians would not be able to ignore them. Now, as we all know, everybody objected and everyone was ignored. Well, not everyone, but a huge proportion of populations around the world have not had any say in this. But like I said, I really wasn't trying to offend anybody. I was trying with humour. Funnily enough, I was using satire, which is an American invention. And there's no question that the kind of level of satire that I used for Shoot the Dog would not have been acceptable over here. You know?
Right.
And as I said, I don't feel that it's a compromise, because I think the things that I sung about, apart from the fact that I wrote them a year before 9/11, I started writing this song. It's almost dated in the fact that it's trying to talk about what might happen. You know, it's all happened. Yeah. So, you know, I don't really think I have a message I think I'm preaching to the converted these days. You know?
We're 15 days away from sovereignty, at least on paper, being handed back over to the Iraqis. And even people who were critical of going into the war the way we did say, well, at least maybe things will turn out by the end of this year or within 5 years' time for the better. Are you hopeful as well?
You have to be hopeful. You have to be hopeful. It's easy to be despondent about what's going on, but you have to be hopeful. I mean, I think the world is definitely a more dangerous place than it was a couple of years ago, but I try not to be fatalistic about it. You know, I think people are more politically aware at this moment in time than at any time I can remember in my adult history. And if anything, if nothing else, then I think what's gone on has been positive in that way. I think for Americans to really be looking at foreign policy in the way that they are now, I think is a healthy thing.
Right.
I think Americans are so done a disservice at the moment, because at the moment you're being tarred with the same brush by most, I don't know, Europeans, I would imagine most Muslims or whatever. And I know that, I know just from experience that Americans are people that are actually good people trying to do the best. You know, I think it's not America's fault that your media doesn't tell you what's going on outside of America until it's too late, you know. And I think America deserves a lot more information. Americans are good people that are at the moment being horribly misrepresented abroad. Right. So
your relationship actually with this country is an interesting one, because it's always seemed to me to be a bit contradictory, because I mean, in some ways you've had almost sort of, you know, two careers in the last decade, one in the rest of the world and one here. And you know, and while I know that sometimes on the political level, perhaps this, you know, this country's decisions and yours don't see eye to eye. Your partner's American. In fact, he's Texan. You don't get much more American than that.
You don't get much more American than Texan.
Right?
No.
You know, do you feel like a certain ambivalence toward this country? I remember seeing you at the, even though we didn't see each other socially that time, the Equality Rocks concert about, was it 4 years ago in D.C. And you had some remarks on stage that came off, not angry, but a little bit sort of like, you know, I don't know if you guys remember who I am, you know, sort of thing. And, you know,
oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, I think it was probably smarting from the fact that songs from the last century, which I was singing two or three songs from, had come in at these staggering heights of 180 something, I think. Right. But no, I don't feel that. I think I was very angry about the issue that I was there to talk about, which was basically the torture of gay teenagers. Right. And I think to this day, it's shocking. Sure. It's shocking that didn't present any kind of. I mean, nobody even reported on what I was talking about in England, let alone over here. I think it's very difficult. I think gay issues are such they are such a political minefield over here that unfortunately, when you try and point out that there are gay issues that affect young teenagers, people start to kind of put up barriers. I feel that
young people and sex in general, it makes people uneasy.
Of course, yeah. I think they should be a lot more uneasy about the idea that people are sending their children to centres where they're basically given aversion therapy, including electric shock treatment. I think that's the kind of thing that Americans are not aware of, that if they were more aware of them, they would do something about it. Right. You know, because to me that doesn't make any sense, and it wouldn't make sense to the average American.
But do you feel like your relationship in many ways with this country is kind of black and white, kind of ambivalent?
I don't think I'm ambivalent about it. I think I accept the limitations of American media, and I accept that I'm a square peg in a round hole here, you know?
In terms of formats and programming?
In terms of all kinds of things, in all kinds of things, in terms of the way I think about things, in terms of the fact that I'm gay, many things that are hard to get around in this country, which have never been an issue for me in Europe. And I mean, the evidence is there in the fact that my career never stopped in Europe. Even though I was really not present, and even though I had just about enough energy and enough wherewithal to make on a regular enough basis, because there was a greatest hits and there was a covers album, you know. Even though I've only made I've had very little product out there, Europe has been no problem for me. Right. Whereas post 1991, America would have always been a very difficult thing for me to negotiate, because I had apparently rejected fame, which I hadn't. I was saying I needed to calm it down because I was only 24 and I was going insane.
Put the brakes on.
Yeah, I needed to put the brakes on. So immediately I was doing something anti-American, because I was saying, you know what? Success doesn't have to be this way. You know, you can retain some of your life. And so immediately I was kind of saying, well, in this country, it's so much, it's so about the American dream that if you reject the idea of huge success, you're almost blaspheming. Right. So I think on that basis, I fit much better in Europe, because we have a more skeptical idea of success and, you know, money and stuff like that. And then, of course, there's the homosexuality, the fact that I'm not even vaguely apologetic about it. And then there are my political views, which, again, are not normally expressed in music anymore. Yeah. So I really don't fit on so many levels. Yeah, whereas I actually think I would always have fitted my generation of buyers. I think they've not been exposed to what I've done in the last 10 years, but I don't think for one moment that section of American society suddenly decided they didn't like my music. Right, right.
You know? So it's not, because I've heard people say here, and admittedly it's fans who, when Older came out, said it's just such a tough it's a tough fit for this country, that record, because it was as ballad heavy as whatever you want to call it as it was. You don't think it was musical? You think it had more to do with those decisions you made in terms
I
of...
don't think it was musical because I had already put out Listen Without Prejudice, which was hardly Faith Part 2.
Right.
You know, Listen Without Prejudice was a pretty heavy record in some ways. If anything, it's the heaviest of the four. By the way, did you know that if you put my four album titles together, you get, if you think Faith, Listen Without Prejudice, Older, and Patience, you get Flop. Which I thought was quite good.
There you go.
For 80 million records, Flop is quite a good description, really.
Yeah, yeah. So, but when you think about, do you give much thought to a, whatever you want to call it, comeback, resurgence, you know, reclaiming sort of some place in this country? Or is it something like if it happens, and if not?
Oh, I felt like that. I felt like that since America. Well, since American radio decided they weren't really interested in me anymore, I felt like that for a long time. I'm spoiled. I've always, everywhere I've been in my life, what I've done with my talent has produced a result, a positive result. I've never had to convince people of anything, anywhere. And at any point in the last 10 years, I would have been having to convince people. I'm here. As far as I'm concerned, I'm here touching base again. I don't really see the potential for a massive George Michael comeback because I think of some of those things that we just talked about. But I definitely feel that I owe it to people who have not seen me here for many years to come and explain to them why I've been away. Right. Even if I'm planning on, you know, other things in the future. I just think that there are about 1 million people in this country that stood by me through thick and thin, really. And I felt that they absolutely deserved this contact now that I feel kind of like $1 million again, you know.
Right. Getting back to the notion that this country has more of a problem with the revelation that you were gay, and the way that it happened as well. I mean, what do you think, who do you think you would be in terms of your public persona had the Will Rogers Park incident not happened? I mean, would you be...
Well, in the rest of the world, no different. Yeah. No different. In the rest of the world, it was just like a little bump. And then I carried on selling records. Right. I mean, I sold masses of records on the back of the little bump. You know, the greatest hits in the Christmas of that year probably sold roughly twice as much as if I hadn't drawn attention to myself in such a you know, obvious manner. There's no question it benefited me in the rest of the world, and also my attitude to things and the openness that I've shown since that has benefited me in the rest of the world.
But had it not happened, do you think it would still be that situation of people speculating and you kind of not committing one way or the other?
Yeah, I don't think people, really, in reality,
had died down?
In reality, what had happened already by the time of the arrest in Europe is that people had already read a lot about my first partner and his death, which hadn't happened here. Right. It wasn't in the public consciousness here. There were stories that hit the tabloids that I made no effort to rebut, you know, and by the time Older came out, my presentation of myself, the lyrics, the dedications, everything that was there in their consciousness, other than me sitting with someone going, I'm gay. Yes, I am gay. Yes, it's not terribly hard to work out, but yes, I am gay. That was all that hadn't happened. So of course it was fantastic for the tabloids getting me literally with my pants down. But there was nothing shocking to the public, even in terms of, oh, well, he hid that from us. Whereas over here, because the last thing they really remembered of me was Faith, you know, and the beginnings of Listen Without Prejudice, it seemed like this huge revelation, you know. So it's really hard to talk about what it could have done to my career in other places, because it doesn't really, if anything, it just improved things. It improved my relationship with my audience because I became more generous in the way I spoke, you know. Without having to hide anything, you can actually talk more freely in general, you know.
You referred to Anselmo there, and there's a song that's subtitled Anselmo's Song on the album. Is it safe to say you still carry a part of him with you all the time? I mean, is he still wearing your mind a lot?
Absolutely. I've met 2 people in the last 3 days that knew him.
Really?
I mean, yeah, he's kind of ever present in some ways, and he's ever present in the fact that I do not believe that if I hadn't met Anselmo when I did, and lost him when I did, I wouldn't have met Kenny. And Kenny's been with me for the past 8 years. My relationship with Anselmo, although very, very intense, was only 2 years. And I absolutely thank Anselmo for everything that changed about me. I thank him for for opening me up to my own sexuality. I thank him for teaching me huge lessons about love and death at a point where I probably needed to learn them, you know, all kinds of things. You know, you can't, I'm very happy with where I am today. It's been a very difficult road, but I thank everyone that's involved in getting me to, emotionally, to where I am today, because I would never have imagined that at 20 or 25, I would have never imagined that I could be this person, you know.
And speaking of Kenny, the Texas Geezer's got a track on the record as well for him. American
By the way, he
Angel.
chose his own picture.
Really? Wow, that's nice.
I wanted a
to let
picture.
him.
I wanted a picture of both of us, but he said he looked fat in the one that I liked.
There you go. Talk about that song a bit and what he thought of it when he first heard it.
Well, the funny thing is, I wouldn't play it to him for about 2 days because we just had a massive row. And in the lyric, it says my American angel, he doesn't want to fight, and we'd been fighting furiously. So I just felt it was the wrong time to play it to him. But no, he loves it. I think he's very proud of that, and Amazing is very obviously about Kenny as well. So,
are you more the fighter of the two? Is it?
No, he's the one that knows how to make me fight. I'm the louder.
The buttons to push?
Put it this way, the dogs think that I'm the boss because I shout loudest.
So I've read something that you said, and at least in one interview, maybe in a couple actually, in the last few months, and I thought I actually admire quite a bit, but I don't know what reaction other people have had, especially for the guy who once, you know, famously scrawled "Explore monogamy" on Kathy Young's backside.
It wasn't her backside. Give the girl a break. It was her shoulders. Okay, her ass isn't that big.
It's her back. Okay.
You couldn't have got 8 letters across.
That sexual monogamy per se is not an issue for you guys, and that it's not, you know, and things work out quite fine. Thank you very much having it that way.
Yeah, but it wouldn't have worked in any of the relationships I'd had with women. You know, you know, and that, absolutely. I think if you are going to. I think if you're, it's a very strange thing. I'm never going to see myself as a straight or bisexual man again. So it's a very strange thing. But at the time, in reality, it was more a response to the fact that people were freaking out, you know, right in the middle of the AIDS epidemic, that I was making a song that said, sex is natural, sex is good, not everybody does it, but everybody should.
Oh, I wasn't pointing out the contradiction. I'm just more curious about
I'm saying that the contradiction exists because I was kind of fibbing. Because I was kind of pressured into that statement. I'm perfectly prepared to say it 16 years later. It was like, you've got to do something to give these right-wing people the idea that you're being responsible. And at 40, I understand that monogamy is an essential part of family, the construct of family. You cannot possibly, well, unless it's a very strange family, you cannot possibly stay the same young guy that gets to chase everything he wants to in terms of raising a family with happy children. But monogamy is there, I think, for that reason. And if you're outside of that reasoning, and if you are not responsible for the happiness of children, you're two men who are responsible for your own happiness and responsible for your relationship, then there are all kinds of possibilities to that relationship. Now, we know that as gay people, but straight people think, you know, ultimately, straight people think, well, what a filthy way to live. You know, whereas actually straight people don't think that. Straight women think that. Straight men pretend to think that. Because actually straight men know exactly how fantastic it must be never to have to stop chasing everything you want to.
So if men were true to themselves, straight or gay, they'd be...
Well, yeah, I think men are... I'm sorry, I don't think gay men's sexuality is about being gay. It's about being men with freedom, you know. So I honestly believe that... given the opportunity to behave for the rest of their lives the way they did until they were 20, 22, 25, most straight men would. But they're just not given the opportunity. So once they have the responsibilities that mean that is no longer possible or responsible, then they have to tell themselves that they don't, you know, that really that isn't a massive part of life that they miss, whereas we all know that it is. You know?
So if someone says, oh, how can it be a real relationship if you're not sexually monogamous?
Well, I don't really bother explaining it to them, because if somebody really thinks that, then we just have different opinions. And I don't think that it is the way. I think it's one way that works. It works for Kenny and I. It would not work for another gay couple, you know. And but I think in terms of, I think it has to be said, many long surviving relationships in the gay community are long surviving relationships because some arrangement has been come to prevent these two people lying and cheating.
Another track I want to ask you about, and I don't really know if ever in the past you've written so specifically about anyone in your family as you do about your uncle in a track called My Mother Had a Brother. Can you talk a bit about that and sort of how his story, for those who don't know it, and when you came to know his story and what happened to him?
Well, it's interesting when people talk to me about my mother had a brother, the first thing they nearly always say is it true? Because it sounds so overly dramatic, you know. But the story goes that my mum sat me down when I was about 17 years old and told me pretty much the things about her life story that she felt were too disturbing to tell me when I was younger. And one of them was the fact that on the day I was born, or within 24 hours of my birth, that her closest sibling, whose name was Colin, bless him, unfortunately Colin doesn't really rhyme with anything, so he didn't get an actual name check in the song. But he was my mother's brother. He looked apparently exactly like me, because I look just like my mum anyway. And my mother told me that he killed himself within 24 hours of my birth, and she told me that he was a very depressed young man, very highly sensitive and very probably gay, right? Which I would imagine if he was depressed as a man in his early 20s and in the early 60s, it would have contributed majorly to the fact that he killed himself, right. You know. And that I've used that story, that thing that so shocked me at the time, in a way to maintain my courage in situations where my sexuality could get in the way. Because as far as I'm concerned, worldwide humiliation doesn't even begin to compare with the idea that in 1963 they were still locking people like me up, you know. Well, they did in 1996, didn't they? But I mean, like, for a long time. Right. And ultimately, the worst anyone can do to me is write something which they feel the straight world will not understand, and so they'll write with a certain amount of homophobia. But no one's going to throw, you know, I'm going to go out and do it again tonight, and no one's going to be able to stop me. That's the point. Right. That there was a prison that the gay community lived in, which, as long as you're born in certain parts of the world, if you're lucky enough to be born in England or America, or whatever, or certain parts of England or America, you can live a very happy, openly gay life. And obviously I'm a testament to that, whether I'm famous or not.
But it's a relatively limited part of the world that you can do that in. Yeah.
And I'm still shocked to this day that gay people do not treat one another with the kind of respect that remembers how much freedom we have now and how much we were joined by homophobia in the early, well, until the second half of the last century. Because I think actually within the community there really isn't enough of an understanding of that. We sometimes treat each other incredibly badly when the world is still treating us pretty badly. But anyway, my point being that I have been subjected, obviously, to huge homophobia, just in the form of the way I was arrested, entrapped, arrested, written about, you know, laughed about, even if I was laughing with them. Still, ultimately it's homophobia. And that may be massive, but I do have to appreciate that my freedom is more important than that, you know. Right. And I waited to write this song for many years because I felt that the oldest member of my mother's family, her eldest sister, would have been affronted by the fact that I would make a family situation so public. And after she passed away last year, it wasn't a conscious decision, but I kept thinking about Colin. I kept thinking about this, and it was almost as though my mum was saying to me, this is important in terms of your life. It affected, I think, the way my mother showed fear of my own sexuality when I was younger, that I didn't really understand what it was about, but I knew it was out of character. And now I understand what she was afraid of. Because now I understand,
down that same route?
Of course, because you know, when I finally did tell my mother and father about my sexuality, I made it very clear to them that it was not something that had brought me pain, that it was something I was glad about, and that I had an incredible life, and that I was lucky in so many respects that I would deal with it and they didn't have to worry about me. But I think...
So you think she would be happy with this song?
Absolutely, yeah. I think she was afraid that my sexuality was going to be a source of misery, you know. So in my early years, I could sense something going on that was trying to encourage more masculinity than was there. And so of course
Also
it did
early,
directly affect me.
And early and mid-'80s, let's not forget, you know, this awful epidemic called AIDS was breaking, and everyone was, who was next,
that was a major part of me not talking to my parents about my sexuality, because even though I knew they would be fine with it, I also knew in the early 80s, just like every other gay man, that they would be terrified day after day about what the consequences of being gay could be for me, you know. And I think that kept a lot of people from telling their parents at the point that they would have wished to about their sexuality when it came to the 80s and 90s, you know.
The summer tends to bring out a lot of sort of veteran artists on the road, but this summer in particular,
we've talked
about, I mean, Madonna, Prince, and
Morrissey.
No one
mentions Morrissey because it's Madonna, Prince. Who else was mentioned before? I'm trying to think. Who's the fourth artist?
The Cure. Or
no, it's not them. It's another major solo artist. But anyway,
I can't think.
I think it's
Ross,
I think it's.
Are they back on the road?
No. Although he is on a reality TV show in England.
Is that right? Matt Goss?
Matt is, yeah.
Really?
Cooking.
Oh wow. A Goss, another Goss. Is there any relation there?
No. Although I do occasionally. Actually, people occasionally did ask him if he was one of Bros. Yes.
Yeah.
Which didn't go down too well, even though he hadn't seen what Bros looked like.
Right.
But I'm trying to think. There is someone else. I think it's kind of strange that these 80s artists are all kind of getting out there again at the same time. It's just a strange coincidence, I think. But also there's that passage of time where after 20 years, you know, there's that whole... Now you see here, this is the first place on earth that I've ever had what it could be even vaguely perceived as a comeback. Because I didn't go away anywhere else in real terms, you know, in terms of being on the radio. But here it's like I really am Mr. 80s, you know. Yeah,
right. I mean... But would you like to sort of move beyond that, right? I would think.
Or
does it matter?
I don't really mind. I don't really mind.
Do you always seem to have an affection more for certain songs, though, from your catalog? I mean, you go back to Father Figure a lot. I know for a while you did everything.
It's easy.
Oh, really?
It's really easy to sing, and I've had to sing. You know, I mean, being someone who's promoting again after this much time, and I've never, believe me, I've never been in a position in America where I couldn't, or anywhere where I couldn't dictate my terms. Now, having not been on the radio for the best part of 10, 12 years, I come here and really I'm kind of having to eat humble pie a lot, right? And I see that as a necessary part of trying to say hello to my fans again, you know, but it's a weird thing because I'm used to being able to control the musical environment, you know, all kinds of things that here I've just got to say, okay, they don't, you know, I've got no power in this situation, which has been quite interesting. It's been quite challenging for my ego. But no, I'm not looking for any, I don't want a massive comeback. I just kind of want to acknowledge people and try and explain to them that, you know, it wasn't because I didn't care that I wasn't here, you know.
Right. As far as any of these artists who are like, I mean, any interest in seeing Madonna this summer, seeing Prince this summer?
Oh, I think I'll see Madonna tomorrow night, hopefully.
Yeah.
I nearly went to see the show in LA, and then I thought, you know what, it's a brand new show. I should see it when it's been on the road, at least for a little while. Because I knew the chances were that I'd see it in London. But as it turns out, she's following me. I was in LA 2 weeks ago, and she's here now.
Right.
So I think I might pop along. When are they? Do you know? Tomorrow?
They start tomorrow night at the Garden, yeah. Tomorrow.
5 nights.
Yeah, 5 nights.
And it's a great venue. I like I like the Gardens.
Yeah. Oh, one final thing I did want to ask you about, because finally, at least in one small respect, usually the U.S. is so behind Europe in terms of some social progress and things like that. But the Commonwealth of Massachusetts is actually ahead of the UK and Europe in one respect, and that is legally sanctioned marriage.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that, on the debate and the way it's taken off here? And would you guys ever have any interest in doing that?
I think it's quite stunning that amongst the other things that are on the list of this particular administration, that they're actually thinking of making an amendment to the Constitution which will actually restrict people's behaviour, which has never happened before. I read a really fantastic quote in a book the other day where someone said, if you would let us marry one another, we'd stop pretending and marrying people like you, and then you suffering for it later, you know.
Right.
But I think it's to me the confusion is about the religious aspects of things, because there is such a religious aspect to homophobia in this country, because it is, and I don't think it's simple, and I don't think it's easy I don't outright condemn people for their religious beliefs, because I believe that in terms of their religious beliefs they're being misguided by others, right? Much in the same way that politicians misguide people. But I think that I do respect people's faith, but I think in this particular instance, unfortunately, what it's doing is confusing the issue, because really it's a matter of freedom, and this is supposed to be the land of the free, not the land of the free if you're white and straight, you know, and have money, you know.
Right.
And so for me, it's a very strange thing. And also I think America tends to deal, because of religion, I mean, for instance, 64% of Americans go to church on a regular basis. You would probably be shocked to hear that in England it's less than 1.
Right.
And we're not all going around chopping each other's heads off and behaving very unchristianly. I think England is quite a Christian country in its behaviour, well, until recently anyway. And I think that religion deals in absolutes. Something is either absolutely right or absolutely wrong. So in America, a lot of issues are treated that way. And the grey area, which is so important to understanding and progress, tends to be more lost between the extremes shouting. And I think the majority of Americans are much more reasonable than that. But you also have another thing in your constitution, which, even though the basis of it is fantastic, which is that you get to have a political say in everything by voting on bills, which we don't have in Europe. The trouble with that process is, I'm sure if someone were to study people on the extreme left and the extreme right, or even just on the vague left and the vague right, people who are live and let live people, let's say, people who may not approve of things but never believe that their own views should be imposed on others, those people are not going to go out and vote on those bills with the same ferocity as the people that disapprove of the behaviour, or are racist, for instance, and want to get rid of all illegal aliens and make sure none of their children get health or education. You know, this kind of rubbish, as far as I'm concerned. They get a much bigger say. Bigotry has a much bigger say in the voting process, simply because liberals tend to be a bit weak. You know, we tend to be, well, live and let live, I'm getting on with my life, you get on with yours. Whereas people who are right-wing tend to go out and vote against gay people or illegal immigrants or whatever. You see what I'm saying?
Sure, of course.
And in that way, I think your system, in some ways, lets a lot of Americans down. But then they're letting themselves down by not understanding that the right wing will have its way if you don't oppose it by going out and voting.
Yeah.
You
And
know?
a lot of that is motivation from their fundamentalist faith as
absolutely,
well.
Absolutely.
And it's not just
I
Christianity, obviously fundamentalist Islam and
absolutely,
and Jews.
absolutely.
And,
Homosexuality is a very, very difficult issue in most cultures, but it gets easier the more secular that
exactly.
culture becomes.
Right. Well,
This doesn't sound much like a VH1 interview, does it? Not really.
Well, it's good to see you as always.
Okay.
Best of luck
Lovely
with
to
the
see you
record.
again.
And hopefully we'll see each other sooner
Okay.
rather than later.
Okay.
Cool.
Thanks, John.